Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving into something super important: how to be kinder to ourselves. Rachel, I'm sure you've experienced this. Have you ever caught yourself thinking something about yourself that you'd never dream of saying to a friend?
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, sometimes the things I say to myself, well, let's just say HR would have a field day. But isn't that just part of pushing yourself? A little tough love never hurt anyone, right?
Well, that's exactly what Kristin Neff challenges in her book, Self-Compassion. She really flips that whole tough love idea on its head. Instead of constantly beating ourselves up, Neff shows us how to actually build ourselves up, using self-kindness, recognizing our shared humanity, and practicing mindfulness. It's a real shift in perspective that can help us break free from that cycle of self-criticism and create lives that are not only more satisfying for us, but also more connected with the people around us.
Okay, I'm listening. But if I trade my inner critic for, say, an overly enthusiastic life coach, how do I make that feel genuine? How do I avoid just feeling, like I'm faking it the whole time?
That's a fantastic question, and we're definitely going to get to it. Think of today's episode like planting a garden. First, we're going to dig into the roots of self-criticism. Where does that voice come from, and why is it so persistent? Next, we'll explore the 3 pillars of self-compassion, which are, essentially, the seeds of change. And finally, we'll arm you with some practical tools, your watering can, so to speak, so you can start cultivating that self-kindness every single day.
From weeding to watering, huh? I'm no green thumb, Autumn, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Let's get our hands dirty.
Let's dive into why that inner critic is always blaring, shall we? A lot of it comes from our early years and how society shapes us. Think about how kids soak up what their parents or teachers say. If praise is rare, or if they're always being told what they're doing wrong, they start feeling like they're just not good enough.
Right, so if your folks were heavy on the constructive criticism and light on the hugs, you're probably setting ridiculously high bars for yourself now. But Autumn, isn't there a balance? Don't kids need some criticism to actually improve?
Absolutely, Rachel. But the problem comes when feedback attacks a child's worth, not their actions or effort. Take Emily, for instance. She grew up thinking love had to be earned. Her wins weren't celebrated, and any attention came with the side of criticism. She learned that she had to work for every ounce of affection. Fast forward to her adult relationships, and she couldn't accept genuine kindness, always suspecting ulterior motives, because she was taught that she was only valuable when she achieved something.
Wow, so you're saying Emily isn't just carrying a little baggage, she's hauling a whole moving truck's worth. Do you think it's a deterministic view? Surely, not everyone with critical parents ends up sabotaging their relationships.
You're right. It's not so much about whether criticism exists, but how consistently these early experiences mold our inner narrative. For Emily, the feeling of unworthiness became second nature, reinforced over time. And let's consider the societal pressure. It's not exactly promoting self-love. We're bombarded with the idea of perfection everywhere, from school grades to Instagram feeds.
Social media, the never-ending highlight reel. You post your vacation and someone one-ups you with a private jet selfie. It's like we're all competing to be the most inadequate.
Exactly. Social media gives us these carefully curated glimpses into other people's lives, and we can't help but compare. It's no surprise people feel like they're falling short when they're comparing their everyday reality to someone else's highlight reel. And the worst part? It makes our inner critic even louder, which just chips away at our self-worth.
Okay, so we've got the external and internal sources of self-criticism covered. But what about the big push for high self-esteem? Isn't that supposed to help with this somehow?
You'd think so, But here's the tricky part. Chasing high self-esteem often backfires because it depends on outside approval. That makes it fragile, and it can crumble when we fail or face criticism. Kristin Neff suggests self-compassion as an alternative where it comes from within and doesn't depend on achievements or approval.
Fragile is an understatement. I know people, myself included, who base their worth on a job title or a GPA. One bad quarter, and boom, identity crisis. Got any examples from Neff's work, Autumn?
Yes. There's the college student who ties her entire sense of self-worth to her grades. After one failed exam, her inner critic screams, "This proves I'm not smart," rather than seeing it as a chance to learn. This chase for perfection doesn't build resilience. It just makes the fear of failure worse and harder to bounce back from.
Right, so instead of a healthy bounce back, it's a downward spiral, self-esteem hitting every step on the way. And what about the kids who get trophies just for showing up? Does that help or hurt them?
Actually, it does more harm than good. Over-rewarding kids without linking success to actual effort creates a fake kind of self-esteem. The second those rewards disappear, so does their worth. So they keep chasing validation their whole lives, through social media likes or career ambition.
So self-esteem is high maintenance and conditional? Sounds exhausting. So what makes self-compassion the better choice here?
Well, self-compassion isn't about being the best or beating everyone else. It's about being kind to yourself, no matter what happens. Neff talks about three main components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Together, they give you a stable and sustainable way to relate to yourself, so you don't rely on external things to feel worthy.
Okay, I'm listening. But isn't self-kindness just letting yourself off easy? What about accountability and pushing yourself?
Not at all. Self-kindness doesn't mean you excuse your mistakes. It means you don't beat yourself up for them. Instead of your inner drill sergeant yelling, "You're a failure," the self-kindness voice says, "You tried your best. What can you learn from this? You still take responsibility, but you do it without hurting yourself."
Okay, that's starting to click. But what about shared humanity? How does knowing everyone else messes up too make me feel better about my own epic blunders?
Because feeling alone makes the pain worse. Thinking, I'm the only one who's ever failed at this, adds shame to the mix. Realizing that everyone fails doesn't take your pain away, but it does put it in perspective. It's like realizing everyone gets rained on. It doesn't stop the storm, but you don't feel so alone under your umbrella.
Okay, that's surprisingly comforting. And mindfulness? Is this where we sit in lotus position and hum?
Well, if that helps you, go for it. But mindfulness, as Neff describes it, is mostly about observing your feelings without judging them. It creates some distance between you and your emotions so they don't overwhelm you. You can acknowledge, "I feel sad," or "I feel disappointed," without letting those feelings define you.
So instead of spiraling with, "I'm sad, therefore I'm broken," it's more like, okay, sadness is here, but it's not forever. I like that. It's actually practical.
So after discussing where self-criticism comes from, let's dive into what actually builds self-compassion. Kristin Neff breaks it down into three key elements that all work together: self-kindness, shared humanity, and mindfulness. They each stand alone, but they really boost each other when you practice them together. Think of them as a guide for changing how you treat yourself, especially when things get tough.
So these are the load-bearing walls of self-compassion, huh? Each one provides support, but together they create a super solid structure.
Precisely. Let's start with self-kindness, which means giving yourself the same understanding you'd give a friend. It's basically turning down the volume on that harsh inner critic. Remember David from Neff's research, the young professional? He lost a big client because of a small mistake in a presentation, and his first instinct was to beat himself up, saying he was useless. Self-kindness helps him rethink things. He acknowledges the mistake, sure, but then he actively shifts to more helpful thoughts like, okay, I'm human, mistakes happen, and I'll learn from this.
Okay, but isn't that a bit soft? Are we just going to end up coddling ourselves into never improving?
Here's where people often misunderstand self-kindness. It's not about ignoring the consequences or avoiding responsibility. It's about cutting out the unnecessary emotional punishment, so you're actually in a better headspace to learn. For David, beating himself up wouldn't magically undo the mistake. It would just make him feel worse. It helps open a more productive path forward, still with accountability.
Right, I get the reasoning. But how do you even start doing that when the self-criticism is like a reflex?
Well, Neff gives us some useful tools. Like, you can ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? That immediately takes the wind out of the critic's sails. Or, try writing yourself a compassionate letter, using the kind of tone you'd use with someone you really care about. Even physical gestures, like placing a hand on your heart when you're upset, can send a signal of comfort to your brain. It's all about retraining that instant reaction.
Writing letters, huh? Sounds potentially useful, but I can also see myself feeling pretty silly doing it at first.
Yeah, it might feel weird at first, but think of it like learning a new skill. The more you do it, the more normal it becomes. And really, the long-term benefits are way bigger than any temporary discomfort. Shall we move on to shared humanity?
Yes, please. Because this one's a little abstract for me. How does connecting my struggles to the whole human condition actually make me feel better?
Shared humanity is about reminding ourselves that we're not the only ones going through tough times. It's easy to feel isolated when you're in pain, but the truth is, pain is universal. Take Sarah, the college student who failed a really important exam. She thought she was just uniquely bad at it, especially since on social media, everyone else seemed to be acing everything. But then in a study group, she found out that other people had failed too, and they were just as frustrated as she was. Sharing that experience helped her see her failure less like a personal defect and more like a normal part of learning.
So realizing we're all kind of stumbling along, just at different speeds, takes some of the sting out of it. Is that it?
Exactly. And you can take that perspective even further. Joining support groups or even just thinking about other people's experiences can help dissolve that feeling of shame. Realizing that being imperfect is core to the human experience changes isolation into a sense of connection.
Okay, I see the logic there. But is there a risk of this turning into an excuse fest, you know? Like, everyone messes up, so I'll just chill out?
Not when you combine it with the other pillars, especially mindfulness. Shared humanity isn't about letting yourself off the hook. It's about reframing failure as an unavoidable and even unifying part of trying.
Got it. So mindfulness is the steady hand in all of this, right?
Exactly. Mindfulness is about observing your thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them. It's about noticing your emotions, fear, sadness, even anger, without blowing them up or trying to bury them. Maria, the teacher from one of Neff's examples, got some harsh feedback from a colleague. Her first reaction was to get defensive and start doubting herself. But she used mindfulness to pause and acknowledge her feelings. Ouch, this stings. Then she asked herself, how can I actually use this to grow? That pause helped her separate who she was from the critique.
Okay. So instead of just hitting the autopilot button and spiraling into I'm a total failure, mindfulness throws up a detour sign saying, let's analyze this before we crash and burn.
That's a perfect way to explain it. Tools like labeling emotions, saying I feel hurt or I feel overwhelmed, create a bit of distance, which gives you space to think. Body scans, or even just simple breathing exercises, help you stay grounded in the present moment, instead of getting swept away by self-criticism.
Interesting. And combining this with self-kindness and shared humanity gives you some kind of superpower.
Well, in a way. Each pillar has its own special role. Self-kindness provides that emotional support. Shared humanity keeps you from feeling alone and offers perspective. And mindfulness gives you the clarity and balance to really use the other two. Together, they create a cycle that helps you handle challenges in a new way, making resilience something you can actually achieve and maintain. So, with these core components in mind, let's dive into practical applications. How we can weave self-compassion into our daily routines through some really transformative exercises. This part of Kristin Neff's work is where it really shifts from theory to actionable techniques. Think of it like turning architectural plans into a home you can actually live in.
So we've laid the groundwork, put up the frames, and now it's time to actually furnish this metaphorical house of self-compassion, huh? What's first on the list? Some super fluffy rugs of kindness?
Not exactly rugs, more like the essential tools that make the space livable. One of the key exercises Neff talks about is called soften, soothe, allow. It's all about processing emotional pain, especially those physical symptoms that come with distress.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm intrigued, but also a little skeptical. When emotions really hit, isn't rationality usually the first casualty?
Right. So this practice begins by acknowledging how your body actually holds emotional stress. Emotions aren't just these abstract things floating in our heads. They're super visceral. Think about a time you felt totally overwhelmed. Maybe your chest tightened, or your breathing got shallow. The first step here is softening, literally releasing that physical tension. Consciously relaxing your jaw or shoulders can signal to your nervous system, hey, it's okay, we can chill a little.
So it's like a manual override, flipping a switch from fight or flight to false alarm. No tigers to worry about.
Exactly. The next step, soothing, is all about comfort. A simple act, like placing a hand on your heart or taking a few long, slow breaths, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's natural recovery mode, promoting calm over panic. And then comes allowing, giving yourself permission to just sit with the emotion instead of fighting it tooth and nail.
Okay, I see the theoretical side. But allowing the emotion, doesn't that risk just wallowing? Like sitting there saying, yes, sadness, consume me entirely?
Not at all. Allowing means observing the emotion without judgment or trying to suppress it. Imagine Clara, a software engineer who felt totally crushed after getting some pretty harsh feedback on a project. Using this soften, soothe, allow method, she softened her tensed muscles, soothed herself with some deep breaths and a hand on her heart, and allowed her feelings to surface, saying, it's okay to feel upset. This happens to everyone. It didn't magically erase her disappointment, but it totally reduced its intensity and kept her from spiraling downwards.
Clara's story does make it sound more manageable. So the goal isn't to drown the emotion or ignore it. It's about finding that middle ground where the feeling exists, but doesn't totally bulldoze you.
Exactly. It's about finding a way to coexist with your emotions, rather than fighting them into submission. And speaking of finding clarity amidst chaos, Kristin Neff also suggests another really useful practice for reflecting on and reframing difficult situations: the self-compassionate journal.
Okay, journaling makes sense as a tool. But how does this go beyond just ranting on a page about everything that's gone wrong?
It's not just about venting. It's intentional reflection, mixed with self-kindness. The basic process involves 3 steps: noting down the incident, acknowledging shared humanity, and then reframing any self-criticism with a bit of compassion. For example, Jacob, a recent college grad, missed an important deadline at work. His initial reaction was something like, "I'm a total failure. My career is doomed." But through journaling, he reframed the story. Okay, it was one mistake, and I'm still learning. Next time I'll set reminders.
So, the whole point here is to shift from the doomsday thinking to, what would you actually say to someone else if they were in Jacob's shoes?
Precisely. Responding to ourselves like a supportive friend rewires that natural harshness we tend to default to. Asking yourself, what advice would I give someone I genuinely care about? Often leads to language that is so much kinder than what we're used to giving ourselves. Over time, these entries help rewrite the internal scripts that are the fuel for self-criticism.
That's interesting. So, instead of your journal being just a place to dump your stress, it becomes a place where you actively reframe your perspective. Does that take a fair bit of practice, I imagine?
It definitely does. But like any new habit, repetition is key. It might feel a little forced at first, but with time, that self-compassionate dialogue kind of becomes second nature.
All right, so we've got one exercise for processing emotions and another for more long-term reflection. What about the moments when you just need some immediate triage?
That calls for the self-compassion break. It's a quick 3-step thing you can do designed for those high-stress moments. First, take a pause and acknowledge that something is difficult. Then connect with shared humanity by reminding yourself that struggle is just a universal part of the human experience. And finally, comfort yourself with some self-kindness.
Okay, but let's be real here. If I'm in the middle of a meltdown, say because a project I've been pouring my heart into for a month completely tanks, am I really going to suddenly chant, "This is struggle, I am not alone"?
Well, in a way, yes, though it can be much simpler than a chant. Think about Alex, a teacher who faced intense frustration after receiving some harsh criticism from a parent. He started by just admitting, "This is hard for me," which grounded him in the reality of his emotions. Then he reminded himself, everyone gets criticized at some point, which countered his initial feelings of loneliness and isolation. Finally, he said to himself, "I'll get through this. I just need to breathe and regroup," placing a hand on his chest as a way to self-soothe. These small, deliberate acts calmed his emotions enough for him to respond constructively.
So it's not about fixing the problem right then and there, but about just lowering the emotional temperature enough so you're in a better position to actually deal with it?
Precisely. Think of it as a portable tool that you can use anytime, before a big meeting, after an argument, or even while you're waiting for bad news. And for those who want to take things even further, Neff also explores the power of loving-kindness meditation as a means for cultivating compassion.
Meditation, huh? Does this require yoga poses and incense?
Nope, not at all. It's really all about cultivating empathy through a structured series of kind wishes. You start with yourself, offering phrases like, "May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering." Then you gradually extend those wishes outward to others, friends, strangers, or even those people you're in conflict with. It's really like an emotional warm-up for compassion.
And how does this actually help with self-compassion specifically? Isn't it mainly about improving how you see other people?
It really strengthens both. For example, Clara from earlier used loving kindness meditation to shift her relationship with not only herself, but her colleagues as well. Offering compassion inwardly softened her inner critic. Sending it outwardly improved her patience with others, dissolving some of the frustrations she was carrying from work. Think of the practice as bridging internal and external emotional connections.
All right, so it's like creating a ripple effect. Start with yourself and let kindness radiate outwards. I get that.
Exactly, and what's so amazing about it is that all these practices, whether it's soothing the body, reframing through journaling, or just sending out simple kindness, show how self-compassion isn't just some kind of vague ideal, but super practical, potentially transformative, and totally within reach. Okay, let's bring it all together. We talked about how self-criticism often comes from way back, childhood stuff, societal expectations, and how it messes with our self-worth, right? Then we introduced Kristin Neff's self-compassion idea, a really powerful solution based on self-kindness that shared humanity thing, and of course, mindfulness.
Yeah, and let's be honest. Self-compassion, when I first heard of it, I thought it was just an excuse to be lazy.
No, it's not. And it's not just theory either. The self-compassion journal, this soften, soothe, allow technique, the self-compassion break, they're actual steps we can take to change how we talk to ourselves and face difficulties with more strength.
Right? So it's less about giving yourself a free pass and more about ditching the harsh inner critic. It's about swapping out that inner bully for something that actually encourages growth. I mean, you're saying it's practical without getting all mystical about it.
Precisely. So our homework for everyone is this. Think about the kindness you'd naturally give a good friend who's struggling. Now ask yourself why you wouldn't offer yourself that same level of understanding. No need for grand gestures. Maybe just write down a few nice things to yourself about something you did today. It's a tiny step, but it could lead to a big change.
Right, it's not going to happen overnight. But all right, I'm sold. If Clara, David, and Jacob can all rewrite their internal scripts, I suppose there's a chance for the rest of us. Worth a shot.
Absolutely worth it. Honestly, learning to be there for yourself might be the most transformative thing you ever do. Thanks so much for tuning in today. And remember, until next time, treat yourself as kindly as you treat the people you love the most.